everything these days.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chat Together. This is your host and founder, Pratima Day, and Nato Riley waving at you. You are tuning in for your cup of courage, hope, and imagination, and hopefully a lot of laughs today because that's what me and Nathan have been doing. So this is going to be fun. Yeah, so me and Nathan decided to hop on a Zoom call after 6 months of speaking a lot over chat. And when we first hopped on the Zoom call, all we're doing is laughing and smiling. Life's about, you know?
It's true. And it's like, I'm an ultra introvert, so I tend to, like, you can catch me a lot in chat, but then I can be kind of elusive. Sometimes I rant, but still, I
Your
hide.
shirt says it all.
It's true. It's like the little monster from,
Oh
I don't
my
know what it's
God.
from. Domo.
It's saying, please escape me from this body.
It's like, free me from whatever this is.
This is so fun.
So yeah, so it's like it had been months. We'd been talking, and it's like so I'm an entrepreneur, and I just, I after I've been doing business the way that I've been doing things for who knows, you get to a point where you stop being so, I guess, you just become rather open and just tell people like it is oftentimes, and but I don't talk to everyone who messages me, and I'm sorry to people who try to message me. I get like all these messages, and every now and then there'll be like one or two people out of like 100 who I'm like, oh, hi. Oh, I'll talk to you. Oh yeah, you seem like someone I'm going to. And I don't do this like on purpose. It's not like the for like favorites and things like that, but it's like everyone's got to make friends. And it's like, does being an entrepreneur mean you can't have friends anymore? Like, and that's a weird thing. That I like, anyone who's an entrepreneur gets that. I've had a number of entrepreneurs tell me that being an entrepreneur is the loneliest career choice they've ever made.
I'm just beginning my journey. You know, there's that quote, by Mr. Les Brown that, he says that, it's a lonely journey, but you eat better at the top. However, then, my friend Larry Normal, he said, he disagrees with that because he said if you're with the right people, then you're not going to be lonely. So, but I'm just starting out, and it's like I'm hearing these things. It's fascinating. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. I didn't feel the pain.
Yeah, it's like the community you decide to plug yourself into is like everything. And because I'm the type who's like, if I don't want to spend time with people, I just won't spend any time with them. So I'm more likely to just avoid almost, which is why I'm a really bad entrepreneur. But because I'm aware of it, I can navigate it, which I think this is something with like a lot of entrepreneurs. Almost everyone has something that you're bad at or you don't navigate well. And if we're not self-aware enough to just be honest with it, and like, it's not even a bad thing. Like I run into this where people are like, yeah, but that's bad. It's like, wait. Well, then how are you going to navigate your problems if you can't acknowledge them? If you don't have anything to navigate.
You're not bad, you're weak. There's no bad things.
Yeah, it's like we build communities, we build teams, we do these things because we as individuals, ultimately we're individuals. Like, I guess that's rather straightforward, I guess. So but if we're just individuals, like I found that if I just am like, okay, so I'm bad at this. Oh, but I'm really good at this. And this person over here is so good at that I would rather have an amazing friend who becomes a beautiful part of my journey, even though I'm so bad at that thing they're good at. I don't need to be good at that thing. It doesn't make any sense for me.
Met me. Tell them. Yeah. Do you remember?
Because I was posting about random things.
What? On YouTube.
I remember.
YouTube. Do you remember?
Well, you found my YouTube channel, and you found my radio station too. My old radio station posts.
So Nato had his channel is the only like cybersecurity YouTube channel. Not a lot of people talk about cybersecurity, and I didn't even know much about it until I watched his videos. You guys should all subscribe. What's your channel?
Oh, it's called Ask Nato Riley.
Yes, you should all ask Nato. So much fun. Let's tell them about your doggo. Where is he?
Yeah, so I have this dog. It's like, well, he's a service dog for me because I am disabled and I have like all these weird random issues of who knows what, which you know, you get used to that too. But he is an Alaskan C.H.A.I, and he's a cortisol sniffing dog. And so when my cortisol levels are especially high, then Augustus alerts me, and that's just what he does, and it helps me know that I need to get to a place or a location that's going to make sure that I'm not in a really bad situation. And if he's alerting me, I most certainly should not drive. So if I had driven somewhere and I'm getting alerts from him, then if I drive, that's a bad idea. So probably go find some place to just exist for the rest of the day. So this guy, he knows better than I do, so that I don't end up in some random situation because of my things. So yeah, so he's pretty much like, I don't know, if anyone has a service dog, especially one that you work with like a, I guess like an invisible illness, because mine's like Crohn's disease. I don't mind talking about it. It's like, as Mr. Beast says, because Mr. Beast has Crohn's disease, uh, you just end up being really tired all the time. It's like the disease just being like more tired than most people. Maybe that's one way I'll just put it. And sometimes you get other weird things, but you just have less time of life and less time of energy in a day than most people. And imagine if you needed 16 hours of sleep in a day on average, then that's one way you could kind of look at it. And imagine how much you could accomplish with that limited window of time. But you know, it changes your life priorities and life perspectives. But this little guy, he's like, it's like my buddy.
Well, if it makes you feel better, we're all dying every day. Every minute that passes, we're closer to our death.
I'm pretty, it's weird. I'm actually happiest since I actually ran into having some of my issues, because before I ended up getting like, this sounds kind of grim, before I ended up getting like diagnosed with my illness, it's like my doctor said that this kind of condition is like when lightning strikes. So it was like right around when I was like 28 or 29. And then it's like, nah, I'm like all of a sudden in a hospital. And like, I had a really successful career and I'd done all these things, but I was miserable. Like, if I'm really honest, I was absolutely miserable. Like, I had like everything in like the textbook of all the things that people like would be like they wish they had. It's like I had this nice 6-figure job. I got to travel the world doing all this stuff, building, like I built technologies for like companies like NASA and like, I mean, you name it. For, I don't know, it's weird. And then when that happened, it's like all of a sudden I couldn't work the crazy hours. And I actually stayed at the job for a while, but after like a year of trying to work like I used to with my condition, I just decided to just quit. And then I just like, I started a company, and then I got depressed for a year trying to wonder how to navigate my disability. But then after I figured some things out, honestly, I'm happier than I've ever been. And if I'm going to tell anyone anything, doing significantly less in life all the time is actually really good for your mental health. And it's in a weird way strong-armed me into putting myself in a better mental space. Well, this is another weird one. So when most people get, I don't know if this might be a weird tangent. So cortisol, stress. Did you know that stress actually wreaks like physical like damage to the body for anyone? And so like this is, it's like super nerdy sounding, but it's also like a thing that impacts me. Is so like, why do I have a cortisol sniffing dog? So when people get stressed, the hormone cortisol, not cortisone, some people get that mixed up, but this hormone goes up uh, and causes your body to have certain things. It can cause inflammation, it can cause other things. But then some of us are autoimmune, and you mix that with like excessive stress levels and among other things. But when we get stressed, like this chemical, it'll cause us to like if you're about to go into an interview and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I feel nauseous, and then all of a sudden you feel like you might lose your lunch or whatever right before this interview because you're just getting like so stressed out over this, so worked out over this. That's actually, those feelings, they're actually physiological feelings, and it comes from that excessive cortisol buildup from just being too stressed about what you're trying to do or achieve or accomplish. And so like for most people, they just might get like really tense, and then like all of a sudden your neck hurts, and then you're like, ah, oh, and then you like wonder what you're like, oh, and you might have like a headache and like all those things. These are just like normal symptoms of stress. But the thing that made me get a stronger connection with stress and why I actually try to convince people to try to not live so stressful lives, because it's really bad for all of us, including me, is like, if I get too stressed, like I lose my ability, like my vision goes blurry, or I lose my ability to walk for the day, and maybe I'll be like, now I have a cane, so it's like I don't necessarily crawl. I'll it's like
So
a
cool. So cool.
wonderful,
So freaking
you
cool.
know. So it's like you come up with things that kind of help, but one of the things that having a condition that literally strips me of my capacity to walk from like stress is you just learn to like not be stressed out about things. And so over the past 3 years, like after I learned these things, it's like, what's the best way to learn how to not be stressed is have a condition that requires it of you. But what if normal people who didn't have to strong arm themselves to not be so stressed could
See?
learn that superpower?
Yeah. You
It's a
get
superpower.
positive from it.
Yeah, honestly, it's awesome.
And it's like you possibly will live longer than most people. The more positive and like not stressed. We're not supposed to be stressed.
No,
Usually like a person like like some gurus like Sadhguru and yoga, everything, like you're not supposed to be stressed. Like that's not a good thing. Like being
that's not
the
good.
terms like stress free, like you shouldn't be stressed in the first place. Like
And it's one of those things that's like easier said than done. And it's like when stress occurs, it's weird because if you acknowledge the stress, then that sometimes makes it go. We're like, because sometimes we'll be like, are you stressed? And you know you're stressed, but you're like, no, I'm not stressed. That actually creates more stress. But if you're like, oh, I feel stressed out right now, then you can sit there and think like, I wonder why. And you're like, why am I so stressed out? And that is, I found that like that's a conversation I have with myself. I don't know how many people even think about that ever,
you feel
but
it makes it grow more by keep saying like, oh, I'm so stressed. Like the more you tell yourself that,
well, if you
are you being
repress or
aware
fight,
about it?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it's a, well, how do I put this? Um, if someone to right next to you is like, I'm gonna punch you in the side of the head, and you're like, yeah, right, you're not gonna actually, and then they actually like do, and you didn't decide to like put up your defenses for
Yeah.
it. It's like you have this moment of like awareness where you could really be like, oh, please don't do that. You could even say something, and then they might be like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna do it then. But what if they like even think it's a funny joke, and they're like, I'm gonna punch you, and you're like, whatever. And then all of a sudden they do. It's like it's like jarring. It's extra jarring. You get blindsided. It's the statement of being blindsided. You
Mm.
don't want to get blindsided by like avoiding the awareness of what's here, because stress is actually a physical manifestation where if you have cortisol build up in your body and you're not addressing the fact that you might actually physically feel it, then you're denying a physiological feeling, which causes other things where, let's say that you're like feeling tense, and then there are certain things that might help you alleviate that feeling of tenseness, like that might be a time to just be like, I'm just going to go sit down and meditate for a little bit. And then that, just the self-awareness of it, like, I am stressed, I'm going to go meditate and go sit down and be like, this is
Do you know
nice.
this isn't about stress? So, what I'm going to say about the tapping method, like for anxiety. So,
Mm-hmm.
do you know of it?
No.
Oh, it's like it's on YouTube, but it's basically, you tap yourself like in different parts of your body, and you say,
Mm.
I feel anxious right now, but I fully accept.
Oh, sure. Oh, yes, yes, it's
Yeah,
like self-acceptance.
yeah.
Yes, self-acceptance is such a thing. I think it's so important. It's like you got to own who you are and own what you have, because it's like if I have all these weird setbacks, I have people telling me like, how come you can run your business so well? When I can only work half or maybe a third of the amount of time as most people. I can't work a 40-hour work week if I wanted to. I'm not working right now. I'm like talking to you. I guess some people
I'm
might
not,
look at that as
I'm
like,
not
NATO,
writing
you're
my
working
paper.
all
I'm
the time.
talking to you. Professor's thesis. Speaking
Yeah.
of my professor, NATO is a professor, or shall I say was. Tell them more about all you do, your invention with the Olympiad, like very cool.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. If I were to like condense my story, if I go all the way back to like 2009, I was going to college to be a public speaker, and then like I got hired to sell cell phones while a college student. You got to make money somehow. And it's like what a great college job. But then when I was younger, I got into trouble for hacking computers. and learn to stop doing that. But the Verizon shop was like, you know how to use computers. You want to join the IT side of the company? I was like, no. I just straight up said not at all. And then the contract with Verizon ended, and they were like, well, we don't want to fire you or lay you off, but were you sure you don't want to do computers? Because that's all we have to offer now. And I was like, well, I guess I could try. Fast forward years later, I ended up getting hired at a company building like cloud technologies and built like a cloud from ground up. And then fast forward more years later, I ended up building like AI for like cybersecurity things. And then fast forward to I was like sick, starting a company because I wanted to build a life around my own life structure. And this year in particular, I had been helping out at academies and teaching and mostly teaching people out, being an adjunct
Tell
professor.
them where you live. Tell them where you're located. Yeah.
The beautiful land of Boulder areas and things. So it's a pretty place. Denver is where I mostly taught, and I guess South Denver as well. Like different places around Denver, Boulder is where I mostly spoke and taught. And my students is really interesting thing. I have I love students for one. They're like the best. They have all these great ideas, and you teach them things, and like students have these perspectives from someone who has no context in the realm thereof generally, especially when they're young. And professionals have context in an area, and that context can kind of really strip innovation or strip new ideas or strip the wide eyed, like, whoa, what is that? Like the whole starry eyedness for a beginner is you don't see that past the beginner days. So teaching people, it was really charming, and they'd be like, whoa, the things you've done sound so cool. We want to know how to do those things. And I was like, well, we don't really have a good format to teach that sort of thing. And this random technology is like, there's this little tiny computer called a Raspberry Pi. 2019, all of a sudden, this little tiny computer called a Raspberry Pi was just as, I guess, powerful as like these big data center servers that were like, you put them, they were like the size of a room, like when I was building data centers in 2011. And I'm like scratching my head, and my students are like, we want to learn how to work with real things. And I'm like looking at this tiny thing in modern technology, and then thinking about the giant behemoth cloud machines that I used to build. And I'm like, that's impossible. And so I decided to like pick up a couple of these for my students, and I handed them to them. I'm like, what if we tried to build something with this? And so I gave them something to do, and sure enough, they built something with it, and we built a game where you learn, because it's like they wanted to learn hacking. I'm like, well, that's rather volatile. You can't just go around hacking. You'll go to jail. Don't do that. And so, but they were like, please, can you teach us this stuff, please? And I was like, well, if it's consensual and we set up a thing to where it's like safe and give people like things to safely attack each other, then we can safely attack each other. And so, and they were so motivated that they built this. And I was like, people really want this. So I spent the early part of 2019 trying to figure out how to recreate real world experiences for people and create tools to let people like build their own, I guess, solutions real world, because that's what the people kept asking. So I built this thing, and one thing led to the next, another thing led to the next, and people are like, well, what are you doing? What are you building? And I'd post pictures of like me trying to build this thing. And so then I ended up taking a step back, and I was like, I think I just built software, which is kind of a weird thing to just say after spending like months trying to figure out what you're trying to do. And I was like, oh, I can take everything that I've been like trying to wrap my head around and make a piece of software platform with it. So I did. And then I was like, well, I have to call it something if I'm trying to make this thing called like some software thing, some platform or whatever. And that was called the Olympiad. And so I was like, great. So it's like this has all the things that the students can use to like learn their little real world things, simulate like hacking tournaments with their friends, practice someone could at a company be like, hey everyone, we're going to have a company weekend party, and all of you are trying to learn how to do like cyber defense. All you need is at least a cell phone or a laptop, and everyone can learn the same skills, even if it's a small company with no budget. It was a really weird, bizarre thing to suddenly realize I can build this. And then I realized that I was teaching people how to build clouds on their desks, and I was like, oh. And so I started telling people that, and now we tell people that we sell a cloud hacking platform and teach people how to build cloud technologies, which is true. And it's really weird to think that it's true, but it took other people to tell me that what I was saying is true, because I actually didn't believe what I was saying, but I'd post what I was working on and people would be like, is that DevSecOps? I'd be like, no. And they're like, that's DevSecOps. I was like, what's DevSecOps? And then someone explained what DevSecOps to me was. I was like, oh, I do DevSecOps. And they're like, yeah, that's really valuable. I was like, it is? And they're
Wow.
like, yeah. And so and like I guess because the formats I learned, I didn't know that the semantics, like language is a weird thing. There's semantics that even I don't know, and I have all this education. And apparently this thing I've been doing for years is called DevSecOps, and it took some other person who knew what that was to look at that and be like, that's what you're doing, and it's really valuable and people need this right now. And I was like, oh. And then other
When
people
was
are,
this?
when was that?
Yeah.
That was it was very
Oh,
random. It was that was in August after we released our workshop on how to build an entire cybersecurity program like by yourself, like for your own home.
it's interesting how your mind is, you know how a lot of like we're taught, you know, successful people that hold the vision of your goal to achieve it, but you, I don't want to say fumbled, but it was trial and error for you. It's like you were already doing it, but you didn't know. You were unaware. Like you weren't even in the power of awareness, right?
Well, that now that's what everyone on the outside says. For to everyone on the outside, it looks like magic. But I did grow up with the entrepreneur parents, and the thing that I learned is I don't like to assume what people want. And so when people look at what I'm doing, they assume that I'm doing what most people do, which is trying to come up with something that hopefully people will buy or be
Mm.
interested in. What I've always done is I start with conversations, and I go and first start with people I like talking to. And then I ask the people I like talking to, like what are the things that cause them problems in their day? And I used to do this at companies. It's how I used to get raises and promotions. I would do this with
Wow.
my coworkers.
So
And
it's
this is
about
how
mental
I,
health. It's like
huh?
it's about the mind, like mental health.
It works universally, yeah, because it started really when I started deploying it heavily, and not even, it's just like what my dad did, because he has like a master's in theology around like human semantics and like how people process religion or something. I don't even know. It's
Yes.
complicated.
Yes.
um but he would teach me all these like concepts about like how to work with people, and he'd just be like, just ask them what's troubling them and listen. And like when people start talking about their dogs and their cats, that's a sign that you've won like access to being able to find out how you can help them. If someone's not talking to you about their dogs and their cat, you probably will never figure out how to help them, because they'll probably never give you that information, because people guard it heavily. And so what you do is like you make yourself vulnerable to a person. You're like, hey, I have these life situations, and like life is a weird thing, right? And then you talk to them and be like, well, what are your woes? And then people share woes, and then people talk about the things that they're excited about inevitably. But the interesting thing is, if you want people to start to tell you more positive things, listen to their woes first, and then later on they'll start wanting to tell you all of the things that excite them later. And so like you end up getting a lot of messages with people, so it's really hard to like try to make friends and stuff like that when you do that. But what does happen is you get all these messages of people eventually being like, oh, I worry about this, and oh, I worry about that. And so I try to make like content around like solving like whatever the worry of the week is. And so I'm like, well, what is the worry of the week, everyone? Like, what are you guys worried about? And then I go and talk to my most invested folks, and then I release something that's addressing the worry of the week. And it's like, companies are like, oh, we're losing our offices, and like, what are we going to do? And I'm a cybersecurity professional. What is cybersecurity? You basically prevent companies from going bankrupt. Most people don't know that. They're like, cybersecurity is hacker. No, cybersecurity is bankruptcy prevention. You're about to go bankrupt, and you're hoping that you can be
It's
saved. And
about the money and capitalism.
that's all it is. Yeah. And so it's not really about hackers and stuff. That's marketing. It's really about like, uh-oh, someone broke a regulation from the Office of Civil Rights. And then the company is like, can you help build data to support us against this attack from the Office of Civil Rights? I'm like, you guys are the ones who messed up. That's not an attack from the Office of Civil Rights. I'm like, you're the ones who's mistreating your employees, and then they end up going out of business. I don't help those companies. I'm like, you set your own company on fire and I'm just going to walk away. Like, yeah. But if you want to come up with a product, or you want to come up with things that people, or you want to change lives, or even change your own life, change other people's lives first. But you can't change a person's life if you can't listen to a story about their dog or their kids, or the video game that they enjoyed playing last night, or their favorite TV show. And if you never care about that stuff, your career is just not going to grow very fast. So how do you, and it's not brown nosing, because it's like, okay, so after people talk to you about their dog and their kid, eventually they start they'll tell you all the things they like too all of a sudden, so you'll start getting all this overwhelming, like, oh, I love this, I love that. Listen to those, listen to what they love is right after they tell you what they don't like, and then all of a sudden wait until like the complaints happen about their day to day, and then every day you'll get a new complaint, almost every day, and be the person who receives the complaint. And then, this is what I call building your champions, is what my dad used to call it, is listen to people's complaints. And if you really want to help them, then be like maybe someone says like, oh, I hate building spreadsheets, but maybe you're really good at it. You're like, oh, well, I hate doing this and I have to get this done. Can we trade tasks? And then usually there'll be some resistance. And then finally they'll be like, I really hate spreadsheets. Yes. Okay. You take over the spreadsheet. I'll take over that other thing, because I don't mind doing that. And you're like, oh, yes. And you make each other work for each other, and then you just keep doing it. And so I do the same thing with like customers. So I'll be like, when I build a product, I listen to people's troubles, I listen to what people are saying, and I'm like, how about this? I will help you and only you without charging you or anything, but what I expect in return is I need you to do something for me in return, so that we're working. So I will work for you if you work for me. And then if I can get someone to give me their time, people's time is more valuable than their money. So if someone will give you their time, then you can later on take that and sell whatever that is as a product. Chances are it'll probably sell better than almost any other product, because if one person will give their time, people usually prefer to give money before their time. And so it's easier to get money than it is to get time. So if you want to know if you can make money on something, try to get people's time. But that requires caring about them. Most people won't give you time if they sent, and that's why I think if you're not honest, it comes back on you. And so if you're not honest, I think that turns into a complicated thing that you really don't want to deal with it down
This
the
is
road.
this is a $10,000 package full of nuggets that you just said. Like, these are strategies. Like, people will pay for this like coaching call, like this call right here. It's mental health / mindset training / like cybersecurity training, all of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I recently started calling the cybersecurity industry a mental health industry, and others. I
Yeah.
don't know if
Talk
someone
about
else had
that.
also said the same thing at the same time, but one way or another, right around the same time, other people started saying the same things. And all I care about is I think it's a healthy thing and a healthy message to say. The reality of why we have like online threats and stuff like that is every now and then we have outliers of people who might be actual real criminals in the world, so on and so forth, who really want to hurt people. Great, yes, that exists. But the reality is most of what we call like hackers or threat actors or attackers online and online assailants or even scammers, like when you think of a scammer, it's the same person as a hacker, it's the same as all these things, is oftentimes it's people who are in situations that they don't know how to get out of, and they feel like no one cares about them. And if you want to reduce that, you care about people. And for every person you care about, you might have saved lives, you might have prevented people from getting scammed, you might have prevented another big cyber attack. But it starts with treating people right. And it even goes with companies. Like at companies, if one person starts to have stresses and doubts, or they're being abused at a company, it spreads like a toxin. So if one company employee is unhappy, then everyone else who's associated with them becomes unhappy, and then it slowly spreads like a toxin that you can't stop at a company unless you decide to take control of treating your people right. And the number one thing that I see causing companies to like go bankrupt, mistreatment of people. And also that goes with like, why can't you get customers? That's mistreatment of people. Your customers are your
Mm.
employees. Your employees are your customers. They're all the same. They're all your people. They're all your community. It doesn't matter if it's your employee. It doesn't matter if it's your customer. So for me, I don't care if I'm giving money or getting money. you're my person, you're my community. Like I have some people who are, maybe we could call them customers. I consider them like patrons and people who really make my business work. They might be giving me money, but I look at them as something that's much more because they're giving to an entire community. And then I go and I produce free resources from that. And then they tell me thank you. They're like, I know get spent all this money on this stuff, and I'm so glad that I spent this money because I see you helping all these people, and it just makes me want to support you more. And then people reinvest. And so it just comes down to help people, and help people. I don't know. That's just kind of how I see it.
What's the rest?
uh
You've helped with also sex trafficking, right? What is the work
yeah,
you had done? We talked about that before because
that's a little dark, but yeah.
when I was studying cyber over the summer, that's how I connected with Nato.
Yeah.
Awesome. He's really supportive, and I didn't pay him anything.
Yeah, she didn't pay me anything.
I did share a lot of content, but genuinely, like organically. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you're my people. So it's like, on one end, it's like, like just because this is a weird thing, because I get people and they're like, oh, why are you giving people your time? It's like, I will give my community my time. I will give my people my time. But if you're just like some person trying to make money, or you're just trying to like sniff in on my community, it's like, I gotta defend my community too.
Sniffling. It's about interpersonal. It's about,
yeah.
Well, I made a post about this recently, and also just, it's not about, follow my page. Also, it's like interpersonal communication, and like that's what my major is. And I don't read lengthy posts. I mean, like when people just DM you and things, like, no, delete, like, hi, hello, how are you? Like these simple things are so necessary. And
yes,
people are just so like, join my group, I don't even know who you are. Like, I don't have any connection with you. We're not friends. Like, why should I support you? You don't even know what I do.
Yeah, and it really is a tricky thing, because it requires energy and effort from both parties, but it has to start with the leader, because people will, if the leader gives their time, other people will give their time in return. I think a lot of people in Facebook groups, you see that there's a struggle with this, where people will be like, I want to get a Facebook group manager, where I got a community manager so that I could spend more time. No, actually, so Rachel's my business coach and business partner, but we actually have Sarah Kirk is a new community manager who we just brought on just recently. And her, when I see, it's funny because Rachel Spiewak is someone who, like, I see a lot of people building communities and stuff, and you see all these people across the communities of entrepreneurs, like she's got like over 1,000 people in that group now. And it's like, there are these people who will want to be like, I want a community manager. Then they get a community manager, and then they want to remove themselves from the community in a way, hoping that, like, oh, I'm tired, so well, you can post. Just make a post every day, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, I thought you were posting. Why you're not doing your job if people aren't. It's like people started to come in the group in the first place because of the leader, and the leader needs to make sure that the leader gives the leader's time generously. And if the leader doesn't give their time generously, then it's not going to. Your time becomes more valuable as you keep giving it away. As you stop giving it away, it becomes less valuable, which is a really weird concept for a leader, because it's like the opposite for just about anyone else. Because if I keep giving more of my time away in an online format, that means that for every set of eyeballs who watches me, that's a new set of hours. So if one person watches me for 2 hours, then I get another viewer who watches me for 2 hours. That's like 4 hours of people watching. And then if I, multiply that by however many people are watching, but you have to give your attention if you think for a second that you want to get that kind of attention in return. And a lot of people don't understand that element is that the insertion of your time is what generates other people's time coming back to you. It's an investment. It's an investment that's more painful than money. It's an investment that's more expensive than money can buy. It's an investment that money can't buy. And so that's why, if you really want to give your time. You can give money, great. But the thing is, a lot of times I see people try to give money instead of their time. And the minute you start giving money instead of your time, that's when you start to see your community fall apart if you're a leader. And that's just something that you run it. So I guess like the sex trafficking thing, this is kind of a sad story, but it's like,
I was thinking that in my head too. Came back to it.
yeah, because it's like one thing that I spend a lot of time on is I used to do all kinds of what are called bounties of various sorts, like vigilante bounties or bug bounties. I It's kind of a dark theme and place to be, but like I grew up in kind of a dark background. I'll just say that as a blanket statement.
And they can watch the video about it if they are with caution.
Yes, I made a video on my YouTube channel that has a trigger warning on it because it's actually rather trauma. It's about my trauma and my traumatic background. So and people cry when they watch it. So if you want to
Yeah.
cry, go watch my video.
I will be honest, I still have not watched it. I actually forgot about it, but it is heavy. And if you're in a heavy place, especially during the pandemic, please do not watch it. It will not
Yes,
you.
that's right. It's some, and that's why I made the trigger warning, is that for some people, like I made the trigger warning and I had people say thank you for making the trigger warning because they're like, I just can't do this right now.
Mhm.
And it was the right thing to do for me to just give people that warning because it's kind of dark.
Yes. And my professor does this, which is great as well. Not always. I mean, people try to, but it's so necessary and it's you being considerate about other people and
Hmm.
just trauma is very real. And
It is, yeah.
but not to negate from the fact that how necessary it is for you to make that video. It's I will be watching it. It's people watch it when they're ready. It's like not everyone's
That's right.
like right now. Like with everything that we all do as entrepreneurs or whatever job you may have, someone someone may be seeing you post for a long time, but they may be like, oh, I never checked out your channel, I know you're always posting, and then they feel ready and then they do it. And
Yep.
that's also how you build like community.
Yeah, it's true. Like I know that there are some people who will follow me for 1 to 2 years and they'll look at the title and not click on it. Then some of them will click on it, and as soon as they see the trigger warning, and you can see the percentage of fall offs too. They just like click off because it's just not the time. But then later on, all of a sudden they'll go back and watch it and say thank you for making this. And so it's like you need to do things at the time that's right for you. And so I won't get into some of the like super dark things, but it's like an example of like the kind of work I do is like if anyone's ever heard of like a Game Boy, like I used to, one of the things that got me into technology is I used to like fix Game Boys back when my family didn't have money to give me certain things, but my friends would give me like broken things. We're like, oh, this thing doesn't work. I'm like, can I have it? So
Before
I'd be
my
like,
time.
oh yeah,
Before my time.
oh yeah, oh yeah. You're not. I'm old, everyone.
No,
Just so
how
you
old
know.
are you, Nato? 30s?
I'm like in my 30s, like my mid
I'm
30s.
27.
Oh yeah, we've got almost a decade
Soon to be
apart.
28. Continue.
So it's like back, like my friends, like I would have some friends who would have things I didn't have, and they're like, "Oh, my Game Boy's broken. My parents got me a new one," and they like, and I'd be like, "Well, can I have the broken one?" And they'd be like, "I don't know, it doesn't work." Yeah, sure, because it's who wants this broken Game Boy? So I'd fix these things, and so later on, this turned into
Wow.
part of my cybersecurity career, where like the Game Boys turned into like they got a new name called like a Game Boy Advance. Then all of a sudden you had the 3DS or the Nintendo DS before. It doesn't matter. Anyone who's a nerd knows like the order of things. But the point is, at some point, they became online devices. That's the part that actually is rather mortifying because not only did they become online devices, but they got cameras on them. And who's buying these online devices with cameras? Parents buying it for their kids. That's a scary thing. And so this is where a lot of my cybersecurity career also comes from, like dealing with some of this is I would start basically working with Nintendo to submit reports on things that make it vulnerable for like child predators to basically like target kids through Game Boys. That's the most blunt way for me to say it
Mhm.
without getting like too heavy about it. But it's like um someone shouldn't be able to get into a young child's like a leisure video game
Yeah.
time, them just trying to have a fun time, like making fun little pictures that only their parents see. And it shouldn't be a malicious or a dangerous thing, but the world can be a dark place.
Or
And
even iPads. And
yeah,
uh,
yeah, iPad, same thing, because it's like
mhm.
portable devices with internet that have cameras on them. It's it's a thing that we need to think about if you are a parent, or if you are doing security,
So
or you're
then,
working in the line of
so I have
work
a
that I
question.
come
So
from.
then, would it be possible for, the hacker to send pornography to the child, things of that nature, right? Is that
All
possible?
kinds of stuff, if that, yeah, because
Yeah.
they can basically steal and send.
Mm.
So it's like they can put things in places, and then they can also like take things. They're more likely to take stuff and then like put it in like a little like a market and try to make money off of it, which then creates other complications. And it's like for every person's, because I used to work then in the enterprise space doing sim, and so it's like this is my background, and all of a sudden I'm working where I'm doing like the AI that's used for, so like let's say you work at a large, very expensive corporate business. None of my clients were like companies that don't have a revenue of like at least like 10 million a year, just because the products that we sold cost on like on the low end, the lowest end was like $10,000 a year for these things. $100,000 a year is a little more average, and like the highest sale I've ever made for this like company was like $5 million sales.
Wow.
So you don't see this technology anywhere, but like you go to like a large company, uh the mega corporations, like a multi-billion dollar company. So
Mm.
you imagine they have tons of employees, thousands of employees, and you're setting up these things that like look for threats and look for people who might be suspicious or malicious or cause problems at the company. Inevitably you always find the darkest situations first that have to get taken care of. It's not the most exciting
Mm.
topic, but it's like this is what's going on, like this is a violation, like these are legal problems, like this is out of my hands at this point. And then in some cases I would have to report things, especially if it did have to do with like child trafficking based things, because then it's like on the end that I was on cybersecurity, where I was trying to prevent that stuff and teach people how to fight those things. Later on, I suddenly was on the side of the people who are the customers of these malicious people, right? Who are buying these things. Where it's like now it's like we're identifying these customers, and then you don't want to like target the pedophile too fast, because you want to find out how they're like who they're getting this from too, if you can, so that it's not just like okay, so there's just one of many. Why don't we go after the whole network, right? It's a complicated
Mm.
thing. So and then that's something that you have to kind of like report in other things, and then I'd kind of stay out of certain areas. But we live in a time and we live in a world where like the internet can be a scary thing, it can be a beautiful thing, but we do need to care about each other. Like we need to care, like business is about your family, because if you're running a business and these things are happening at your company and you don't know it, that's a terrifying thing. And that's a reality for anyone starting a company, is that you're hiring people, and if you're not setting up things to help make sure that you have a safe working environment, that includes the internet and what's like how people are, it's just important. You just want to know who you're working with, how you're working with people, and you want to make sure that you put your people first and make sure that your people are safe. So, I mean, that's the industry. Cybersecurity is kind of a dark industry when I think about it. I'm like, well, I was talking in class one day, and this is actually a funny thing. Some students complained because I have so I'm autoimmune. When COVID happened, I pulled up like COVID tracking dashboards and stuff. Like it's my practitioner. It's like I protect human life, I protect businesses, and including like protect myself. So I'm like tracking this thing, and I was like, oh yeah, let me show you some cybersecurity skills, how you can even protect your health. People were so upset by me showing them that aspect and that side of cybersecurity that they were complaining about me as a professor, which was interesting. And I can understand where they're coming from, but it's like this is not the industry for you if you think that you want to work in a place that is designed to protect mental health on the internet. The internet's a terrifying place, and I don't know if people understand that if they like want to work in fields like cybersecurity.
I wanted to add in that uh, that can also be compared. The scenarios that you said can be compared to real life, as in when someone's dating a narcissist. It's like cybersecurity is just like that with the attack, like in children. But in real life, it can also be like a situation where it's a romantic illness, like
Hmm.
mm, you said
Yeah,
relation. Yeah.
It's a tricky thing.
Yeah, it was like about 3 minutes ago, but I've been holding that thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the things. I do tend to rant. But
Oh,
yeah,
great. Where
it's
were we?
definitely interesting.
Oh, yeah. So they were complaining.
Yeah, that's pretty much the end of my story.
Oh,
But yeah, it's just mental health is such a big deal. Like everyone on the internet, if you're online, mental health is your problem. And
Mhm.
that's the reality of that's honestly the only reason cybersecurity even exists in the first place, is if everyone was mentally the same and everyone thought the same way, we wouldn't have cybercrime, we wouldn't have any of these other things. And cybercrime now translates to physical crime, so nowadays it's all the same.
Mm.
It used to not be the same, now it's all the same because
That's
everyone's
so
on the
good what you
internet.
said. Do you find other people to be speaking about cybersecurity such as you do regard to mental health, or is it just you feel like who's advocating for that?
Two other very huge leaders have picked
Mm-hmm.
up the microphone on this, like two very big leaders. One who has also made a YouTube video, which I will say, the wonderful Nadine Tanner, who has been
Oh
recognized in
yeah.
Security Magazine now as
I took
one
her
of the.
course for cyber
Oh yeah, yeah, she's
from the
amazing.
Washington University on EDX everywhere.
She's she's now one of the leaders, women leaders in cybersecurity, even recognized in Security Magazine. Like she's the
That's
real
awesome.
thing. She's
The
the author of
Oprah
multiple
of
books.
security.
Oh, really? She really is. And she did an outstanding speech on imposter syndrome and how really those who think that they like don't know much, they're probably the ones who know the most, but they're probably the ones who need the most encouragement, and how we all kind of rip ourselves apart. Especially if you're smart, you probably are harsher on yourself. So maybe that's the thing. If you are hard on yourself and you're watching this, just tell yourself that that must be a sign that you're really, really, really smart. And I'm sorry that it's sometimes painful, but at least there's a positive thing to think about, because some days are hard. Um, and then Douglas Brush, who's a big podcaster in the industry, we've all been on the advocacy train, and others are starting to jump on now too. But they're the big ones that I know of that I talk to, who are like, yeah, like let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about our own mental health.
Wow.
Let's just open those doors. Let's open those gates, because the reality is, like, as long as we don't acknowledge that it's only going to get worse on the internet, as long as we like, if mental health needs to be on the forefront of the internet, if we don't want to have just like max like havoc and chaos and people trying to like fight each other against their disagreeing camps.
I was gonna say it's not going anywhere. Mental health is here to stay until you die, people. So
It's so important. Yeah. It's
heal
as long as you're
yourselves.
human.
Heal yourself. Tell everyone where they can find you, unless we do this for 8 more hours.
Okay, so you can find me on I'm on LinkedIn probably the most. And then
Yes. Yes.
yeah. And then I have a Facebook group called the Nosha Squad, where I do free coaching for people who are trying to get into the cybersecurity industry on Fridays.
It's
And
awesome.
then YouTube, that's where I put, that's like my content catch. Also, if you just want to watch all my content and be like mostly viewer and you don't like reading so much, then YouTube's the place to be. So that's what I do.
Yes. And your wonderful website. I will be posting everything below.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Well,
You can
thank you for your
contact me.
time, because like I
Yeah.
said, time is just the most valuable thing, and I know that you're
Yeah.
there. Thank you.
So you can cash at me $day P2. Did you not get it?
Oh, I don't
Did you
know
hear
if
what I said?
I think I heard it, but I don't know if I understood
I said
it.
you can cash app me. Do you get it?
Cash.
Cash app. You can send me money.
Oh, there we go. I see. Yes.
Day. Now I forgot. $day P2. Now I had to think about it.
I get very easily confused.
I can tell. But you are awesome. Very intellectual.
You are awesome too, even though I get
I know.
confused.
I am. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Bye, and thank you for what you do. Take care.